it fired the right parts of your brain to fire your your fast twitch muscles. And they could train fighter pilots to fly 40% more quickly. So this is a human with technology plugged into their head to make that human perform. They've also developed a wristband that you put the wristband on here, and it sends pulses through your nerves. And you can learn anything 20% more quickly. This is not science fiction. This will be on the market in a couple of years. You're all going to be competing with people who are learning from a young age 20% more quickly than we've ever done. And when you're doing that, would you not buy one just to get the job? You might indeed. So the role of the leadership is, in the 21st century, is we've got this augmented future. We don't know what it looks like. We've got this current changing position where everyone is in this toxic, crazy, changing, psychologically distressed state. How do we solve that so we can be productive? Because we cannot be productive with zealots and toxic people and people psychologically distressed. We have to solve this problem. So ultimately what I talk about is how people cope and how you can deliver at a leadership level an environment, a psychologically safe environment that stops a lot of these productivity killing things happening. So that's my research. I'll go back into it a bit later on. But I'll now sort of look at this alcoholic leadership metaphor and how alcoholic leadership can be, how you can start thinking about leadership through the metaphor of alcohol to fit in this gap. Okay, so most people know who he is. I don't know how many of you also know who Steve Wozniak. You should do. You're in the IT capital of India, so we should all know Steve Wozniak is. So this is literally how I met Steve Wozniak and never realized it. One of the things I've done in the past was I was a tennis coach. I played first level tennis in Australia and I coached. And Steve Wozniak loves Australia. And he has a flat near the tennis club that I coached and played at. And I played a mixed doubles, and we were sitting on the balcony having a drink. And there was some Americans. There was a bowling club as well, so not 10-pin bowling, lawn bowling. It's a big sport in Australia, lawn bowling. And so there were some Americans playing lawn bowling right next to us, so right below the balcony they were playing. And this guy comes up to us and he says, I'm sorry, we're just being really loud and obnoxious. I'm sorry, I know you don't want all these Americans in your lovely club because we're being too loud and blah, blah, blah. And he came and he said, look, what I'd like to do, I'll just buy you a drink to say, because we're disturbing you. So he came and bought us a drink and he sat down and he had a drink with us and he chatted and we sort of said, he asked us questions of what do you do and what do you do, and we asked him, what do you do? He said, I used to be in computers. So I'm retired now. I used to be in computers. And he was a lovely, lovely guy. I only found out that it was him because he tweeted that he'd been at the club, and someone I worked with said, oh, did you realise that Steve Wozniak was at your club last night? And I went, no, what? And he showed me a picture of him. He said, oh, yeah, I drank with him for about 40 minutes and didn't realise it at any stage. So the Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs relationship. There's a gap here that, so I met Steve Wozniak drinking alcohol. And he did buy me a beer, which was lovely of him. The two of them together are a legend in the IT industry. Okay, so Wozniak has an IQ of about 200. Without it, Steve Jobs probably would never have been Steve Jobs. Okay, so we're looking at Wozniak first. As I said, a uber nice guy, when uber actually meant something nice. An uber nice guy. He's generous. Some of the stories about him, about his generosity to his colleagues, are legendary. Never ever wanted to manage. So when he joined, when Steve Jobs was trying to persuade him to sort of come and set up Apple with him, he was totally and utterly loyal to Hewlett Packard. So this is the culture paradigm again. This is the idea that you're loyal to your organization. Your values are the same. You love, and Hewlett Packard in those days, again before Carly Fiorina destroyed it, was a great company to work for. So no Hewlett Packard people in the room. I I had Hewlett Packard as a client when she took over. God, it went in like 1 week. It went from brilliant place to go to oh my God. So yeah, she's not there anymore. So it's okay. The device lag her off a little bit. Yeah, and she stood for US president as well, possibly even worse than Donald Trump. Jobs tried to persuade. So the only way they got him to do it, to leave, was they said, at no stage will you have any management responsibility. You can be a pure engineer. And that's all he wanted to do. He wanted to create engineering stuff. He wanted to create computers. He wanted to do stuff that nobody else had done. So on the plane to Mumbai, I watched Three Idiots for the first time. And the hero of Three Idiots sort of reminded me of that Wozniak desire just to create engineering products. And that's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to manage anybody. Jobs, totally different. Toxic, bully, thought he was amazing, didn't have the IQ of Wozniak, and plugged into Wozniak and got sort of used Wozniak as this, the genius that made Steve Jobs' career. My favourite story about the two there's two really good stories about the two of them that sort of show the difference between them. First of all, the first job they ever got paid for together. They had to design some products for a third party. And Jobs said to Wozniak, we're going to get $750 each. What he didn't say to him was there was a bonus if they produced X number of products before a certain time. And the bonus was $5,000. So Jobs gave Wozniak the $750 and kept the $750, and then Jobs pocketed the $5,000. And this is recorded in Apple's history as Steve Jobs steals $5,000 off Steve Wozniak. But that's what he was like. He just cared about the power. He just cared about I am the man. I want to make decisions. I want to be a leader. The second story, when Apple's IPO happened and they made their millions. Everyone Wozniak worked with, he gave shares to. Everyone in the engineering team. The people that helped Steve Jobs at management level, he didn't give a share to any of them. Even though he'd promised at the IPO, he said, right, yeah, no, you guys have helped me, you're going to take this. Not one of them he didn't give them a share to any of them. And Wozniak gave them $1 million each. Okay, so, we all idolize Jobs as a leader. And we all Wozniak didn't want to be a leader. But Jobs wasn't a leader at this stage. He got sacked from Apple. The first time he was in Apple, he got sacked because Wozniak left. And without Wozniak, there was nobody to soften him. Wozniak was the only person he listened to. And this then sort of so he then got sacked. He's founded Next. He was in Pixar. And he learned how to lead. He had to go through some coaching. He had to learn from other people how to actually soften himself. And this takes us into sort of the gap of leadership. We've got a lot of theories about leadership. Authentic leadership, servant leadership, transformational leadership, transactional leadership. If you've been through an MBA at any stage, you'd have had all of them thrown at you. Transformational leadership's where it's at, and authentic leadership's where it's at. I prefer Jeffrey Pfeiffer's description, and he calls it all leadership BS. Because your leadership is contextual and it relates to what you are doing in that position at that time and what the organization is doing. You can't just be authentic. You can't just be a servant. You have to move between them all. You have to do different things. But one of the earliest theories of leadership, and I think this is the one that fits best with the gap in alcoholic leadership. Has anyone heard of Kurt Lewin? Yes. So Kurt Lewin, one of the great social psychologists of all time. So he basically said there are three definitive forms of leadership. The first one is autocratic. So that's Jobs. Autocratic, I'm the bully, I say you do, I will be aggressive, I will do whatever I can to make you do it. You have no say in the matter. You just do what you are told. At the other end of the spectrum, laissez-faire management. I'm not going to manage you at all. You just go off and manage yourself and do your own stuff. And in the middle, we have democratic management, where there's some participative decision making, we have conversations, everybody gets involved, there's some to and fro's, a bit like what I tried to do with the leadership question. And I think that's where we look at, with alcoholic leadership, that's what we're looking at. So you can have really hard and fast rules. You can say, right, no alcohol at all. I'm the autocrat. I'm the only one who gets to drink. The rest of you do what you're told. You don't have any fun at all. You're just here to work. The autocratic. The laissez-faire one, hey guys, just party. Do what you want. Just party. I don't care. I'm just here to buy your alcohol for you. The democratic one is somewhere in the middle again. He's not the drunken party fool. And he's not the hard, dry, you guys can't drink at all. It's the dinner party. It's sharing wine. It's having a meaningful conversations with people around a dinner table. And then at the end of it, having learned something, shared something, having grown a little bit. The idea of that sort of controlled way of drinking. And that's what we're looking at. So that's how I met and never realised I met Steve Wozniak until later. So if we're going to go into these sort of stories about prohibitive power. So here we have autocratic leadership, prohibitive power. Drunken stupor, laissez-faire leadership, or tipsy bliss. The tipsy bliss of the dinner party, where you've had some wonderful conversations, you've enjoyed your red wine, you've had some fun, and you've learned something at the same time, and at the end of it you can go home and say, oh look, that was really... So tipsy bliss being the sweet spot between authoritarian and laissez-faire leadership. So I've got a few little stories to tell you about leadership in this space. So I'll start off with the Volkswagen's emissions scandal. So Volkswagen... when I was doing the research on this, I actually found out that Volkswagen somehow were both authoritarian and pissed the whole time they were running the emissions scandal. So the authoritarian is really easy to understand. Volkswagen's culture was such that you as an engineer delivered. If you didn't deliver, they'd just find another candidate who could. So if you said to the leadership, I can't do this, we can't do this, this is a problem, then you would potentially lose your job. So who is going to do that? Who, when they found out that they couldn't do the engineering to get the emissions level down to the required amount for American regulation, who is going to say, right, no, we can't do it. Well, okay, we'll get engineers who can. Nobody will, because they had that threatening, bullying culture where they said, right, if you can't do it, you're out. We'll get someone who can. And so people lied to keep their jobs. They hid from people that they were putting some software in the car that hid the level of carbon monoxide emission. So that when it was tested, it looked great, and the American regulation system said, oh yeah, we can have this car, we'll put it on the market. And then when it was driven, 40 times higher the legal limit. So eventually they were discovered, and there was the big scandal. And people lost their jobs, and people got sued, and I think 1 or 2 people even went to jail in Germany. But they were pissed at the same time. Why were they pissed at the same time? Because 5 years earlier they'd done it before, and they'd forgotten. So at one level, you weren't allowed to have any kind of discussion about why you couldn't do this. You were if you can't do it, you're not a good employee. You just do what your leader says. And at the other side, they were so pissed, they were so drunk, that they couldn't remember that they'd done exactly the same thing 5 years earlier and said, never again, never again, never again, and then did the same thing. The other one in that space did a very, very similar thing, which was Nokia. So Nokia, I mean, it does exist, but it's Microsoft owned, and it's a sort of a fragile shell of what it used to be. The Nokia leaders were so aggressive and so toxic and so bullying that, again, the employees wouldn't tell them that they couldn't deliver the kind of software they wanted. And again, doing the same research, doing research for this, What they actually had in Nokia was they had two separate teams delivering software projects that were competing with each other. So this one didn't work properly because they didn't have all their resources on it, and this one didn't work properly because they didn't have all their resources on it, and neither of them could compete with the quality of the Apple phone or the Android phone, and they collapsed. And again, they'd done the same thing before. They'd 4 years earlier, they'd run these two parallel development streams and had failed dismally to deliver some software. And they said, never again, never again. But nobody was willing to say, this is, to the managers, we're doing this again. This is a problem. This is going to hurt the company. So I like, in terms of a metaphorical sense, you wanted to sort of the idea of prohibition in the 1920s America, where they banned drinking. Everything goes underground. You have all of these horrific behaviors underground. So in America, you have people shooting and killing and fighting and murdering and all kinds of stuff. It's less, that doesn't happen in an organization, but it's the same sort of thing. You get people hiding stuff. You get people doing anything to stay, lying to keep their jobs. You get people stabbing each other in the back to try and push the blame to those people. This is the prohibition kind of state that people are in those kind of companies. So if you're an authoritarian leader, and if anybody says this is a problem, and you say, well, you're out, off with your head, the potential scandals or existential threats that happen to Volkswagen and Nokia could happen to you as well. And then we'll go to the laissez-faire leadership. So the first one is obviously Uber. Uber's laissez-faire leadership, we had Travis Kalanick, who was CEO, COO, CFO, whatever doing every single job in the company, and so stretched that he had no idea what anyone else was doing, just let them do whatever they wanted. And of course, then you had the sexual harassment case with the blog that was published, and then they found out that actually this person that was being blamed had sexually harassed multiple women, and the HR department were hiding in it just because he was supposedly a high performer, whatever that means. And then he found out that people were going to strip clubs and taking women to strip clubs with them and expecting the women to enjoy it. And then you found out that they were threatening drivers. And you found out that Travis Kalanick actually had an argument with the driver. All of this stuff was going on because it was so laissez-faire. He didn't have a set of system. And I think, as we talked about earlier, it was all about the hustle. It's all about just getting the money in. It's all about the hustle. And if any of you are stressed at the moment, just imagine what it would be like working for Uber at the moment. That stress, that is a stressful environment. They're getting lawsuits thrown at them everywhere. They might get thrown out of X number of countries. They're dealing with whether they're drivers or employees or workers or contractors. It's constant because they never ever did this at the beginning because it was so laissez-faire. The second example of laissez-faire is one of my favorite. Is probably my favorite one, which is Wells Fargo. So you know Wells Fargo, the US bank? Yeah. And the cross-selling scandal. So we all know what cross-selling is? Everyone? So I don't need to explain it? Good. So, how many people have 8 bank accounts? One. Oh, so a Wells Fargo customer right there. So the interesting thing about Wells Fargo is they decided in order to cross-sell, in order to deepen their relationships with their customers, blah, 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 that their customers would have 8 bank accounts. The national average was 2.3 with the same company. Now, you would hope that Wells Fargo did this because they did all of the market research, and they said, right, actually, everybody needs 8 bank accounts. Everybody should have 8 bank accounts because that's what our customers need. That's not what they did. What did they do? Why 8? Anyone know? Because it rhymes with great. Okay, that is the leadership decision. 8 rhymes with great. That was their strategy. And then everything starts to move up and everything starts going really well. So the money's coming in and it looks great. But what's happening to the poor employees? There was one woman who was so stressed at work, was so stressed with these targets, that she was drinking a bottle of hand sanitizer a day to deal with the stress. She would go into the bathroom and she would drink a bottle of hand sanitizer. There were people, professional, ex-professional athletes who were developing tics because they couldn't cope with the stress. My favourite story, there was a robbery. So there was a thief and he got caught in one of the Wells Fargo's branches. And he got caught and he defecated in the middle of the shot, in the middle of it. So there was he was lying on the floor and it was smelling like crazy.